My name is Rachel Giles, and I am a student at the University of Mary Washington and a Communication and Digital Studies major. For my final project for Applied Digital Studies, I wanted to create an empathetic and educational video about the current state of LGBTQ equality in the U.S. As a part of this project, I interviewed individuals who identify as queer and transgender about their opinions, observations, and experiences. I know we have a long way to go, but I also wanted to see what other members of my community thought. So my first interview question was, have we achieved LGBTQ equality in the US?
I don't think so. And I say that because like, like as of right now with the political climate and everything, everyone's super worried that um marriage equality is going to be overturned. Um, trans people are always facing some sort of adversity. And so I definitely think things are better than they were. But there's still a lot that can happen, and there's still a lot of growth that needs to happen within everybody. And I think this goes to the LGBT community as well, because there's a lot of issues within the community itself. Like there's a lot of um, biphobia and even transphobia as well, and people just need to start learning and listening and just opening their minds up to other ways of life. Not everything is straight and cisgendered.
To put it plainly, not really. I guess I don't know when would be a good point to say like, yes, we've completely done it. Like, because there's always going to be some sort of negative backlash towards LGBT people. Unfortunately, just because of like, there's different people out there with different backgrounds and different ideas. So unfortunately, I'm not quite sure when we could achieve that, but currently, to say the least, no, we haven't. Because I mean, even with Trump administration, he did a lot going back on what was done, I think, what, 2015, 2016? I kind of forgot. Oops. But, and I mean, sure, like things are a lot better than they were in maybe the 2000s or like even the 70s or whatever. Better, like at least the idea of homosexuality isn't considered a mental illness anymore. I mean, for some people, it probably still is, but by many people, it's not. So there's that, but it's also kind of like, oh, that's just crumbs. Like, I don't want that to be the bare minimum. But yeah, no, I there's definitely a lot we can improve on, like a lot more security for people who are trans, especially people who are trans. I want to say maybe I'm biased because I am a trans person, but I know there's like so much going wrong, honestly, for like trans women or like trans people of color. Like they are the ones that especially need the security that a lot of them just don't have. So yes, I think the United States can definitely do something about improvement in terms of like queer laws.
No. um, I think we've started making steps. I don't think we are there. Like marriage equality is great and a huge win, but the fact that like every other right we have is basically up for grabs every election cycle as like a hot button issue is pretty telling. um the fact that people like my girlfriend is 25 years old. Her family does not know I exist. They do not know she is a lesbian. She's scared to tell people at every job she's had. I've never been at work before. The fact that my aunt, it took her like 10 years to be able to adopt my niece. or not my niece, my cousin. So marriage equality was a big step, but it's not the be-all end-all solution.
So, are queer and transgender individuals protected legally in the United States? Let's examine the current state of LGBTQ+ rights. Most recently, the Supreme Court has become a battleground for LGBTQ+ progress when certain states try to deny rights to queer and transgender individuals. Most famously, perhaps, the 2015 case Obergefell v. Hodges established a national precedent for same-sex marriage rights. However, this summer, the court has also helped set a precedent for workplace protections for LGBTQ+ individuals. But these protections and future progress are at risk with the recently established conservative supermajority in the court, after the nomination of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. It is unclear whether or not the courts can remain such a bastion for LGBTQ progress. Additionally, previous decisions made are at risk. Justices Alito and Clarence Thomas have stated that they would appreciate overturning the Obergefell v. Hodges decision, which has many queer couples on edge, particularly those in states that did not ensure marriage equality prior to the federal decision in 2015. As a result, it becomes important for us to secure legal protections for LGBTQ individuals outside of these court decisions. By codifying into law rights and protections for queer and transgender individuals, we send a clear message to the American public that it is no longer acceptable to discriminate against these individuals. There are no religious exceptions. There are no moral exceptions. Every human being, every American has a right to be treated with respect and to not be denied access to any opportunity as a result of their gender identity or sexual orientation. Now that we understand how important legislation that protects LGBTQ rights is, let's talk about some of our options. The key piece of legislation that can make a difference for queer and trans individuals is the Equality Act. The Equality Act addresses discrimination against LGBTQ individuals across a breadth of issues, including marriage, employment, housing, credit, and access to public spaces and businesses. Arguments against it are that it is an infringement on religious freedom, and that by allowing trans people to access the bathroom of their gender identity, it will allow perverts to pretend to be trans to access these spaces. This ignores the reality that trans people use the bathroom of their gender identity now, in many cases, and this simply does not occur. It also minimizes the fact that trans people are frequently harassed and assaulted simply for existing as trans in public spaces. While Virginia became the 20th state to ban conversion therapy in March of 2020, we need a federal ban to protect vulnerable queer and trans youth across this country. Conversion therapy is typically conducted through a religious organization and seeks to eliminate queer and trans identities. However, the impact that this quote-unquote therapy has on queer youth and individuals who participate, either willingly or unwillingly, can be devastating on their mental health. These programs work to strip participants of their very identity. In addition to driving individuals to self-harm and causing lifelong trauma, conversion therapy historically does not work. We continue to perpetuate a narrative that queerness and religion have to exist as opposites, but this is not the case. A recent published study by the Williams Institute identifies that 40% of youth aged 18 to 34 identify as religious, and this percentage increases with age up to 64.9% after the age of 65. One of the most egregious examples of how far we have left to go to achieve equality is the continued legality of the gay or trans panic defense. According to LGBTbar.org, this defense strategy in a court of law asks the jury to find that, quote, a victim's sexual orientation or gender identity and expression is to blame for a defendant's violent reaction, including murder. It is not a freestanding defense to criminal liability, but rather a legal tactic used to bolster other defenses. When a perpetrator uses an LGBTQ panic defense, they are claiming that a victim's sexual orientation or gender identity not only explains but excuses a loss of self-control and the subsequent assault. By fully or partially acquitting the perpetrators of crimes against LGBTQ victims, this defense implies that LGBTQ lives are worth less than others. End quote. Legislation to enact a national ban on this defense has been brought forth in both the Senate and the House as of last summer. However, both have been referred to subcommittee and have not seen further progress since. I wanted to know how my interviewees' experiences as LGBTQ individuals had affected them both at home and at the workplace. So my second question was, has your queer or trans identity affected your goals professionally or personally?
I think it has affected me a lot more personally and a lot of like my own personal growth goals. Just dealing like, with my own coming to terms with my non-binary identity and even like in like the most recent, like within the last week or so, I've really kind of almost come to the terms with the fact that, Timbala, you're technically trans since you don't identify as just a woman. And I was like, oh, what? No, I don't think that's right. But it's true. But with that, I'm having to, I don't want to say stunt my growth, but I'm definitely not able to grow as the person that I want to be because of where I'm stuck now. And that's because I have a very conservative Christian family, and because I'm not necessarily what everyone thinks of when they think the LGBTQ plus community. Um, I feel like even explaining it to my parents, it's not going to make sense, and it's just going to make life extra hard. And so I'm having to put, you know, coming out officially like on pause until I feel safe to do so, which sucks. It sucks a lot. Um, but I also understand that it's something that I need to do. And I also kind of need to work on the fact that like there's no time limit to coming out. And I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm rushing myself. But I'm allowed to come out when I feel like I have to. It's not up to other people, and it's definitely not up to other people to tell me, I can't be this, this, or this, just because they have certain um, already preconceived notions of what a non-binary person looks like or what a queer person looks or acts like. That's all up to me. Professionally, I have not run into into any issues. Um, but I'm also not necessarily out professionally. So that might be an issue in and of itself. I'm not sure. I just don't dwell on it. I really just try to take everything a day at a time.
So yes, it definitely has, because I came out when I was in about middle school as like a trans guy, and that kind of just shaped my entire being, quite honestly, just because I was like, well, here's another part of my identity that I'm coming to terms with. So I guess I just have to live with this now and figure out kind of where I want to go from here. And obviously, like, middle schoolers don't know everything about life quite yet, or they don't even know like what they want to do next week usually. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just, I think even, but kind of like even in middle school, I sort of had an idea like, oh, I like talking to people. I always have like talking to people, and I've been told that I'm a very empathetic person. So I'm like, oh, that's nice. I guess I'll keep that in mind. And then like after a few experiences with different therapists, I was like, I think this is definitely something that I'd want to consider doing, just because I enjoy. Well, first of all, it feels really nice to be heard and to be like really listened to. Sometimes it's not even like the the advice that is important that therapists will give, but just being heard and really seen, which validates someone. And especially in like middle school and early high school, when you feel like all you have is just yourself, it's a very like good feeling to know that someone is like listening to you. But the people that I did see back then weren't necessarily people that were like, they were definitely like queer friendly, LGBT friendly, but that wasn't their main like focus. And being like a trans guy, I would want to say like I'd want to focus on something like that. Should I continue in like with my psychology degree and like continuing maybe doing therapy work, just because I mean I'd want people to not only be seen and be heard and like understood, but at the same time like really have a sense of like this person knows what I'm going through, which would be important to me because like sometimes you can just talk to someone and you're kind of like, well, they're listening to me, which is really good, really nice, and I appreciate it, but maybe they don't really understand me, um, which is like it can also be an isolating feeling. But I mean that's why like I'd want to probably look into more like gender therapy or like what gender therapy, just because I think there's always kind of a need for that, especially with a lot of maybe queer youth. Uh, and I mean, I'm certainly interested in the topic. So yes, I would say um, my identity in terms of like LGBT stuff has definitely impacted my career path.
I don't think it's affected like my specific goals. I think it maybe affects a little bit more of like how to get there. Like I said, I've never been out at a job before, and I'm always worried that like if I am even in like a professional or like a school setting out, like it makes me feel like there's more pressure. Like any failures that I would have wouldn't just be because like I'm bad at my job. It would be like, oh well, that's because of who she is. Um, but like the end goal is the same. The path to getting there is maybe just a little harder, I guess.
So it's clear that even as legislation is passed and we've established employment protections, people still feel afraid to come out at work. So there's work to be done not just politically, but interpersonally and socially to make space for queer and trans identities. I also know that many individuals want to make a difference for this community, but don't really know where to start. My third question to my interviewees was, what can allies do to help us achieve LGBTQ equality?
I think just a big thing allies can do is shut up and let people in the actual community talk. And this goes for any ally to any community, whether it's the LGBT plus community or people of color or disabled people. Regardless, like if you aren't in the community but you want to support them, one of the biggest things you can just do is shut up and listen. And I think one issue that I've run into with allies is that they always come to me with questions. And I don't mind answering questions, but sometimes it gets to a point where it's like you need to just do your own research. I'm not going to answer every question you have, especially if it's like, Timbala, what does this sexuality mean? Or Timbala, what does this gender identity mean? And it's like, I'm not Wikipedia. Google is free. People have written numerous books. One of my favorite non-binary icons, their name is Jeffrey Marsh. I love them. Love them so much. They've written a really great book about the non-binary experience, and I'm sure that if people could just read it and just be open-minded, they will learn so much. But yeah, that's really my big thing, is that allies should really just shut up and listen. Um, I think like for me, not that I'm the entire LGBT plus community, but at least for me, I know that an ally is doing, I guess, kind of their job, just by respecting my pronouns. I've really been pushing to have people use more they them pronouns for me. Um, And when I hear them, I get so happy. I love it. I love hearing it, and just the fact that I'm not being what's the word? It's not it doesn't feel like harsh, and I'm not being made fun of or belittled for wanting to use the pronouns that I prefer. Um and that's just chef's kiss, the respect. I love it. Um so yeah, it's really not hard to be an ally. I think people just need to stop thinking about themselves and just start thinking of the people that they want to support.
I mean, I feel like that is something that a lot of allies want to do, where it's just like, well, what can I do? Because it's like, that's not what I am, but what can I do because I want to help? And in terms of like allies being able to help, the best thing would be to just say like, amplify other voices and don't put your voice on top of them, but instead, like, especially queer voices, like, amplify them, but don't go over them, kind of like, oh well, listen to me now. It's like, no, that's not the point here. As well as just kind of maybe normalize some things that people would consider saying for just queer people. Like, I've seen a lot of and this is actually quite kind of interesting to me. I've seen some like back and forth dispute, kind of over maybe straight people using the word like partner when they have like like let's say a woman refers to her husband as her partner, and it's like, you're not wrong, but I see a lot of people get upset about that because they're like, well, I thought you were queer, and it's just like, well, that's not. I mean, that's not a bad thing, right? But it can also, I don't know, definitely, and that's its own discussion that I don't really even know how to get into, just because it's kind of like, oof. But I mean, I there hasn't really been, I feel, a negative outcome because of that normalization. And like, I've seen plenty of my professors do it, which I think is very interesting. And it does kind of normalize the situation where it's just like calling your significant other your partner instead of like, oh, my wife, my husband, blah blah blah. Like, we're like, okay, that's like whatever. But if you normalize that, then people that are like queer, who have a significant other of like, actually, it doesn't even matter what gender their significant other is, but really just like, oh, okay, this term is kind of all encompassing. Like, this is like not all encompassing necessarily, but like everyone uses it now, and I can feel more comfortable referring to the person that I love as my partner. So I feel like that's helpful, and also just making more queer spaces available, which can be a bit harder, I would say, because it's kind of like, well, it wouldn't really feel great if it's a queer space started by straight people. Then it's kind of like, how much of this space is actually ours, and how much of it is kind of just like, I don't know, like, you like, we understand that you want us to give us a space, but it's like we also want to be kind of have the main reign on it, you know. So definitely just listening. Also, I think it all comes down to listening to your like queer folk around you. Like, what do you want? And if they say like, okay, well, we kind of need something like this, then try to do your best to help with that. Or if you can't necessarily immediately do that, then give it attention. Be like, hey, these people, let's say this like queer community here is having a lot of issue with money or housing or something. Bring attention to it, and that could definitely help. That's definitely a way to be a good ally, I would say. So yeah, just keeping an open mind as well too.
Honestly, I think even smaller things will help. Like just echoing and lifting the voices of like your LGBT friends. If they tell you something is like hard for them or something is unfair to them, it's not your place to like debate it. It's your place to elevate that and help them figure out who to contact, how to get the barrier gone. It's not your place to be like, well, I don't think that that's a problem for you. And just normalizing it. Like, the only reason, like, LGBT couples or just the community as a whole, the only reason it's like abnormal is because it's treated that way. Like, we're all still people. We all still think and feel and do the same things. The only thing abnormal about it is that we are treated as another.
Let's break down what the interviewees mentioned. The first and simplest thing you can do is to respect people's pronouns. When you know someone's pronouns and don't use them, it's disrespectful and dehumanizing. Misgendering contributes to gender dysphoria. It isn't necessary to make a big deal out of it if you accidentally use the wrong pronouns. Just correct yourself. Additionally, if you want to add your pronouns to social bios or email signatures as a way to help normalize asking about or not assuming anyone's pronouns, this is a meaningful and easy step you can take to show support. It's important to speak out without talking over, but you shouldn't stay silent for fear of saying the wrong thing. The best thing you can do as an ally is to uplift the voices of the community. If you don't know many queer or trans individuals, social media is a great tool to do this. You can follow and promote the work of queer and trans activists, artists, and experts. Lastly, normalization is key. Whether that's using gender-neutral language such as partner or referring to groups of individuals as folks or distinguished guests instead of ladies and gentlemen to be inclusive to non-binary individuals. Normalization occurs in the everyday small steps. Queerness and gender identity are just a small facet of who people are. We should respect and celebrate LGBTQ identities for sure, but also know that individuals aren't exclusively defined by their gender or sexuality. I wanted to end this video with what we're fighting for, so my final question for my interviewees was, what does a queer utopia look like?
So when I hear the word utopia, I have this really obscure memory with the word utopia, and it was in 8th grade math class. The middle school I went to offered classes where you could be in a same-sex class. So like girls could be with all girls in a class, or boys could be in all boys in a class, or you could just go ahead with the traditional co-ed, both boys and girls in a class. I was with all the girls. So we got off topic. We would go on little tangents. And for some reason in 8th grade algebra, we were talking about utopias, and my math teacher said that the definition of a utopia is where everyone's minding their own business, and that stuck with me. So when I think of a queer utopia, I really just think of it as people minding their own business when it comes to someone's gender identity or someone's sexuality, because it really shouldn't matter. At the end of the day, I think the qualities that I value in a person are always going to be more spiritual qualities, emotional qualities. So, I want people to be respectful, and I want people to be kind. And I don't think that someone's sexuality or gender identity should be an element of judgment. Because I have met plenty of what's the word? Bad straight people, and I have met plenty of bad queer people. Their sexuality doesn't necessarily equate to their behavior. And I think even especially right now, I think a lot of people still kind of equate being queer as bad. And that's simply not true. That doesn't mean anything towards a person's personality or a person's behavior. And the same thing with gender identity. Like a lot of people have it in their mind that transgendered people are perverts or whatever. And it's like, no, but you know who most likely is a pervert? Your local Catholic priest. So maybe you should chill out and stick to real issues. So I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of a queer utopia, is that people are just kind of doing their own thing without any judgment. And I think at the end of the day, as long as you aren't hurting anybody, you're free to do what you want. Um, yeah, that's kind of what I think.
I would probably want to say like, I mean, just the fact that like you can, if you can just outwardly say like, oh yeah, like my boyfriend like as a guy, or my girlfriend as a woman, or something like that, and no one cares, like no one gives a second glance or whatever. Just the way that, just to be treated like straight cis people are kind of, but also being understood and having the history that a lot of us have gone through, um, like taught first of all, in like maybe even in public schools, I feel would be important, but like also just kind of recognized and having like our struggles recognized. Um, so yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. Just understanding that like, um, being not straight and not cisgender is completely normal, and it's fine. Like it literally doesn't affect anyone else really. Um, so just kind of being treated as normal people and having all the right tools that a lot of us need to like survive properly. Maybe that's kind of like bare bones minimum, but I feel like that would be extremely helpful, right? Like not having a lot of trans people not having to worry about being like hate crime or something, or just not having to worry about being denied housing just because of their identity. Um, and things like that. Like, I don't know, maybe people who are attracted to the same sex not having to worry about being outed at work if they're not necessarily out, and in fear of losing their job. Like, if none of that existed, I think that'd be a pretty good place, right? Um, it's a simple thing, but it's not like LGBT people are asking for like to be worshipped, or like, oh, like have a special like ceremony every single day. I don't know. It's just like we don't want a lot of stuff. We just want to be treated like regular humans with rights. Um, so I feel like that's just kind of it, you know.
I think having it be fully normalized, like when my coworkers are all talking about like, oh, my husband did this or my wife does that, and I say like, oh, well, my girlfriend or my wife does this, they shouldn't then pause and be like, you're what? Like, not having our issues debated constantly, for sure. um and just being able to freely live and do the same as everybody else. Like, yeah, like I said, like if it comes up in conversation, it shouldn't be like that moment where everybody pauses and it's like, I didn't know you're gay.
This video only covers a fraction of both the legislation and the social initiatives that need to take place to help us achieve LGBTQ equality. I hope that it serves as a spark for you to do further research into the topic and make small changes in your life to make space for the queer and trans people you know. Thank you for watching.